Good everyone, and welcome to the AF Wednesday webinar. I'm Matt Keeley, and I head up the crop inputs team here at the AF Group. This time it's Fertiliser Choice, and we've got three knowledgeable speakers to present and discuss their different products and aspects of the market, offering their views on the past, the present, and of course the future. But before we begin, some housekeeping, if I may. We are recording the session and it'll be available online later. Everybody except our speakers will be on mute. If you have any questions, please add it to the chat box at the side there, and we'll take a few questions after each speaker. If we can't get them all in, we will get answers to you afterwards, and each speaker today will be getting 15 minutes to talk and then 5 minutes of questions. So without ado, can I introduce our first speaker as John Fuller, who is the chairman of BrineFlow and joins us here in person here at the AF headquarters. BrineFlow was established in the 1960s, originally blending fertilizers imported from Holland on a farm near Great Yarmouth, but now focuses solely on liquids. John has over 30 years experience in the fertilizer business, and we'd welcome his views on the current and future markets. As we've seen, John, there's been an increased interest in liquid fertilizer, given the volatility of granular products. Have you ever seen times like this in your 30 years of business? Thank you, John.
So I want to talk a little bit upon your invitation on sort of recent, future and current trends in the supply chain. I've got about a dozen slides, we'll whip through them. You were kind enough to say that BrineFlow, which is based in Great Yarmouth, this is the business that fell out of the J&H bun business when the shareholders sold Koch Industries. That adventure didn't last very long, and when the Americans left the field of play, the shareholders picked up what was the liquid fertilizer business, which had been fly-tipped by the side of the road, and we've picked up that baton and run with it. So a combination of our shareholders and staff, we've got nearly over 200 years worth of experience, not just in fertilizer, but in liquids. And BrineFlow has developed now from not just our headquarters in Yarmouth, where we've invested millions of pounds in new terminals, but also in Sunderland, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Look, a lot of conspiracy theorists around, why is fertilizer prices, why have they gone up? Make no mistake, Europe is fed by Russian gas. And it's no surprise to us that as we contemplated the German elections back in August, September, we knew that Nord Stream 2 was going to be the key political thing as Germany is denuclearized. And thus it's turned out to be. We didn't quite get the Ukrainian war situation right, but gas is tight, and producers that were planning on using Russian gas are now going to be trying to get hold of it. Major producers have announced export quotas, not just Russia, although interestingly in liquids the quotas aren't there, but in solid fertilizer you've got Turkey, Egypt and so forth having quotas. Shipping constraints, we all know what's happened in the shipping market as the economy has started to rebound, and that rebounding has also directly affected the market for ammonia. There have been factory shutdowns here in the UK. CF has closed both Ince and Billingham, and although Billingham reopened as part of a deal with CO2, Ince remains closed, and the industry point of view is that probably will remain closed really for the foreseeable future, if at all it ever opens. And when I talk about energy intensity, it is reputed that the Ince factory alone near Cheshire uses fully 11% of the entire UK gas consumption. So as we start talking about carbon efficiency and what have you, and we're at the end of a very long pipe from Russia for that gas, and so you can see why at the end of the line, some of the UK domestic fertilizer production is pretty difficult. Specifically, here in the UK, here's a picture of the CF's factory at Billingham. We've been marginalised, and although fertilizer prices are high in the UK, they're even higher on the continent. So pan-European producers, Yara being one of them, has made the commercial decision, reasonable from their perspective, to focus on supply to Europe. And that led to supply shortages here in the UK back in the June-August period that set the tone for the market. DEFRA has been consulting on the ammonia emissions, and that's a cloud that's hanging over the UK market at the moment. We expect announcements be made about the absolute mandation of ammonia abatement to be applied to all urea fertilizers. That announcement to be made probably in March or April. Let's see. But they're the jungle drums. I mentioned CF earlier. They made a $500 million impairment on their UK assets, and we all know about the CO2 in the beer. 70% of our fertilizers contain sulfur, and sulfur's the dog that hasn't barked in the media. It's very short at the moment, and we also know that certain contracts were cancelled or curtailed. Let's not also forget about the importance that end user consumers are placing on plastic net zero, and that's a headwind which we're all going to have to deal with, as well as the importance of the logistics. With a shortage of lorry drivers, even especially those with the special ADR certificates, it's very difficult to get fertilizer to farm. Little history lesson. The size of the UK fertilizer market is about 2.3 tons of nitrogen fertilizers and 1.2 of compounds. And the bottom little line is showing really how fertilizers have increased by about 60% in the last 10 years, from 400,000 tons or so up to 700. And that's the sort of, if you like, the gross of the market. However, this is an interesting chart. This shows you since 1967 using AIC, which is the trade body, previously the Fertiliser Manufacturers Association, UCASTA. Some people with long memories may remember that acronym, showing how nitrogen fertilizer, mineral nitrogen applied in the grey area, peaked in the mid-80s and has fallen since. Set aside would have been an impact there, organic fertilizers, but has stabilized at about 1 million tons a year of mineral nitrogen applied in Great Britain. But the share of liquid fertilizers represented in the yellow bars is steadily increased. But the line I'm interested in is the green line, because the proportion of nitrogen fertilizer met by liquids out of the total nitrogen applied has gone from 12, and by the mid part of this decade we see about 25%. That is, a quarter of all nitrogen applied in Great Britain will be in liquids if we follow that green trend line, which again is from AIC data. So there's a structural shift to liquids, which I'll talk about now. Liquids is best place a single man operation. There's certainly better agronomy, and with the focus on cleaner water and purer air, be more precisely applied. If you're going to spend £250,000 on a sprayer, you need to use it as best you can. And there are other logistical steps, not least and including is a bulk process, so less emissions, less double handling, and certainly less plastics. Where's fertilizer used? This is an interesting map, 32 million data points from the RPA, showing where arable cropping is located in England. These stats aren't available for Scotland and Wales, but just shows the extraordinary preponderance of arable in the two, and the two circular rings are from Great Yarmouth and Sunderland, where we have our set of operations, about 200 kilometres around there. And I think it's important as we look at this map, as we think about where the UK market may go, because there are some points of view that says, yes, less nitrogen fertilizer will be used going forward as part of public foods, for public goods. And I don't think that that's wrong, but I think we're more likely to see some of the marginal land with high amenity value in Kent and Sussex and in the southwest be taken out and certainly in the northwest here, taken out of production. I think you'll find there will be increasing incentives to push what land is left harder. And so whilst we accept that in aggregate there may be a reduction from the 1 million tons a year of nitrogen applied in the UK, I don't think it's going to be that reduction felt equally. And certainly where Anglia Farmers members live, we see an upside there rather than a downside. And it's also worth saying that at high prices, it's £19 a kilo at the moment. Haven't had that sort of levels for yonks. There's an incentive to be much more precise there. And oops, twiddling around here. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our business. I mean, we have a long history in fertilizer. We've just completed This terminal here in Great Yarmouth, with over 25,000 tonnes of fully bundled enclosed storage with direct access to the quayside. And we're currently constructing Europe's largest fertiliser import terminal in Sunderland. And so we'll be the only UK producer with access to global strategic supply outside Putin's orbit. Putin's gas feeds Europe, and this industry needs to get off Putin's hook. And we've made these decisions before, and it's just coincidence that the balloon's gone up in Ukraine this week. We've got the most modern facilities, environmentally compliant, certainly no lagoons which burn off ammonia and no emissions. And it's very important because it's a highly seasonal business that we've got strategic capacity at the time when people need it. Thinking a little bit more, it's a picture of our Sunderland terminal, which we're just about to quadruple in size, showing our areas, our sphere of operation. So although people may remember the old Bun name and Brimeflow as sort of East Anglian based businesses, we're much more a national business now. And by a combination of avoidance of double handling, factory to field, and I think this is one of the strategic drivers of liquids, is it having a much lower environmental impact, and the ability to manage emissions for clean water and purer air is much greater with the a liquid type system. The avoidance of double handling, being able to one-man operation, that's explaining that green line we saw earlier. But ultimately, thinking about the immediate UK market prospects, sanctions in Russia are going to be pretty tricky, and it's going to have a massive dislocation. It's going to suck in deep water imports from global markets, but it ain't going to be cheap, because the global markets, we're in direct competition with the Chinese and Indians with their subsidized product. They've got deeper products than ourselves. I think less will be used on marginal land, but I think at £19 a kilo, we're going to see a greater shift towards liquids because higher accuracy of application is rewarded. And equally at £19 a kilo, incentives, and we expect the requirement to use ammonia abatement technologies in all fertilizers that have any urea content. So we expect more environmental regulation. And immediately, and the French market is significantly larger than the British market. They're ahead of us. They are tentatively this week trying to build a market for summer delivery. So that it's a much more advanced market, and there is a reset price, but it's significantly higher than we anticipated, and that was before the Ukrainian balloon went up. So I think it would be a brave person who would suggest that, as we had hoped, fertilizer prices will materially reduce for summer delivery. So my final slide, and I think we're to time, is that in a changing world, its security of supply is going to be the really key requirement, along with getting hold of product in emissions, looking after the environment, and being sort of much more efficient on the farm and being incentivized to use every drop as effectively as you can. Chairman, I think I'm to time. That's sort of covered the ground I wanted to cover. Sorry I spoke quite quickly, but hey, fertilizers in the news.
Very much so, John, and thank you very much for a fascinating insight, and particularly the global perspective. I do like the factory to field, the route you take on managing emissions, and I think we'll continue to see this shift to liquid, and really it's managing that volatility on security of supply. So kind of put it out to the audience. So if you have any questions, and also I must thank those who've joined a little bit late, so welcome. But please, any questions from you guys out there? Okay, I've got a question from Brett. I think you might know Brett, John. Brett's asking, what tank deals do you offer for conversions from solids?
Yeah, well, I think the move from solid to liquid, and there's this strategic shift, which for a whole variety of reasons we can see accelerating, not least as the solid imports are going to be constrained for next season at least. It isn't just a change of products, it's a change of system. And what we find is as people change their spray or somebody retires, it tends to throw a requirement to have a change of type of fertilization. We have a number of different offers, either very large tanks, 50,000 cube, so 50,000 litres, 50 cube, which will hold about 2 loads made in GRP. And they, in many cases, can get sprinkled around the farm, or especially in consolidated estates with outlying land. But we also, and increasingly popular, unexpectedly so, are some 30-ton tanks, which only have 1 load, but can be spread more evenly, so there's less sprayer miles to refill, but also allows people to have different numbers of mixes on farms, because 70% plus of our fertilizers contain sulfur. From our Sunderland location, it's well over 80% are sulfur fertilized. So it does allow the more smaller tanks help have a bit more diversity there. And we have, in common with the rest of the industry, a number of different schemes whereby we can place tanks on farms in exchange for a volume commitment. And we've got a significant number of tanks on farms now. And that's dovetailed in with reliable logistics and a huge storage capability for peak season, so which is just about to start.
Thank you for that. And just one last question from me. You've alluded to it in your presentation, really around the activities in Ukraine, and more so with the German Chancellor yesterday halting the commissioning of Nord Stream 2. I know it's going to affect things, but how soon do you think that will take, and how long will it take to wash through to we start seeing an impact of those decisions?
Well, the market has already anticipated those difficulties, and normally you would find that high prices will draw out hidden supplies, but we've seen, and we reason that the UK fertilizer market in terms of solid fertilizer this year is going to be 200,000 tonnes down, and that's partly because the optimum rates are reduced, but also because traders in global markets haven't necessarily wanted to speculate, because from very high levels, it can drop very quickly and nobody wants to be holding the baby at the end. So we've already seen that. I think its prospects for the spring, the late spring and summer fill market, I think we'd hoped that the reset price would drop into the sort of the 300s. That seems pie in the sky at the moment. I know a lot of farmers held back, thinking, "Oh, it'll go off if we strike," or whatever. Without being rude, I think that was somewhat naive because of all the other interplay with those global impacts. And so, they don't appear to have gone away. It's difficult to say. My gut feeling is the market will open in the 400s and top out in the early 5s next year. Who knows? But anyone, fingers crossed, hoping to get a deal starting with a 2 or a 3, I think is less likely, is likely to be disappointed. And it's very late in the day now, with all the logistic problems with road distribution, as well as port congestion, as well as just shutdowns, to expect a large supply. And I suppose for those people who've got it in the east, that's fine. The West Coast market and livestock, who would normally buy little and often in the spring, are going to find themselves in a spot of difficulty.
Thank you, John. I appreciate there's a couple of questions in there from Christopher and David Walls. We will come back to you on those. We're on quite a tight schedule, so I'm going to have to move on to our next speaker, and that is bringing things close to home and the hot topic of carbon capture and renewable products. So I'd like to introduce Professor Peter Hammond from CCL Technologies, who joins us remotely from Swindon. Professor Hammond will be discussing how we can improve our soils through captured carbon dioxide. When I first heard about this new fertiliser option several months ago, we were obviously curious. Essentially, it's a process to create high quality fertiliser from waste. The first farmers to use it said they liked it and the results, plus it lowers their carbon footprint. So all the hot topics at the moment. So I'd like to welcome Professor Hammond to explain what this fertiliser is, how it's made, how it performs, when will it be available, and for how much. So over to you, Professor Hammond.
Okay, thanks very much. So to start off with, we're very much newcomers to this area. Our reason for being a business is for the development of low carbon technologies, more to the point, ones which actually actively capture carbon and turn it into products. And we make a range of things from plastics to heat storage materials and all sorts of other things. But as part of that development process, we became involved in agriculture, mainly because the core of our process is based around organic materials and ammonia. And one of the bulk uses for our materials, we believed, this is going back to about 2014, could be the production of a fertilizer material. So it started off as almost a side issue for us, but has over the last 5 or 6 years become very much our leading and most commercial technology. And we're just really moving into the commercial phase of development now, with some quite large customers ranging from PepsiCo around potatoes and Severn Trent around sewage-based materials. But just to go back now to deal with those questions that we were asked to look at, I think we've heard from John how the extra pressures that are really coming to play in the fertilizer business. And there's all those economic ones to do with cost and issues increasingly around supply. And certainly I think for us, one of the big things is what appears to be a reduction in certainly the prill type material supply actually in the UK. And obviously the cost as well is going up considerably for the reasons we heard earlier around the gas. And also for us, we have been developing a range of technologies that are very much focused on low carbon. And I think what has been interesting for us over the last couple of years is how much influence the consumer and end user has had on the uptake of products. So we're seeing a lot of demand initially from consumers, but also from brand owners like Pepsi, who believe that they can actually get value from the fact that they're producing a low carbon product. And then that leads on to the fact is, how do we get a low carbon product? And that is because we deal with a range of environmental issues, starting with the sort of manufacturing process, where we've already heard how much gas is used in these things. There's a massive carbon footprint for the production of nitrogen, which will be on a good day generating something like 3.5 tons of CO2 per ton of nitrogen. But the sort of thing that's coming in from Russia at the moment is probably generating more like 6 or 7 tons of CO2 per ton of nitrogen. And then after that, I think the point made around the liquids about the increased accuracy and losses in storage from the system is absolutely key, because I think we see that one of the other areas are losses of prill type products, whether it's obviously in different ways with the urea and the ammonium nitrate, but losses into the water supply, or with urea to the ammonia breaking down into nitrous oxide, are becoming really significant problems for the environment. And I think they're coming up more on people's radar. And so I think those areas really need to be addressed. And fortunately for us, our approach allows us to deal head on with a lot of those. So our process, the reason we do well on the manufacturing side of things is because, as was mentioned earlier by Matthew, most of our feedstocks are drawn from waste materials. So the vast majority of our ammonia is from recovered in liquid form from either food AD systems, so the anaerobic digestion sites, either for food ones or sewage ones, where the ammonia is recovered. But also we use a lot of organic material in our products, so that essentially those sludges that are going to field at the moment, either from the sewage AD or other AD sources, we use that material in conjunction with the ammonia as the core of our fertilizer. So we're getting a range of P and K nutrients associated with that organic material. And really, our product, the main thing that we're able to do is up the levels of nitrogen in the end product. And in doing that, we capture carbon dioxide and use that carbon dioxide to stabilize the nutrients held in the pellet. So there's a more even release than you would expect from a conventionally prilled product. And that helps reduce some of the losses as we go into the actual use of the fertilizer in the field. Now, I think before we move on to that, it's worth looking at, we're very much focusing on a low cost reduction with a low energy input. So that's great because we're getting materials from waste. We're also, because we tend to co-deploy on anaerobic digestion sites, we're able to recover a lot of heat from those. And again, that means that the costs of production are not as open to conventional gas pricing as you would see with other products. And so that means that we are not just now, but under general circumstances, able to produce a product which is broadly the same price as on a nutrient basis, on a NPK per kilo, as conventional fertilizers. And whilst we haven't been involved in the fertilizer business, we've been involved in a range of other bulk industries for a long time, and we know that you can't suddenly bring a new product in and double the price and expect anything to happen. So we're very much focused on making sure that the material is price competitive, as in equal as much as possible, and essentially that it offers additional benefits which are largely associated with environmental and solving of environmental problems. Underlying all this obviously needs to be the basis that our materials, our core supply materials, whether that's the nitrogen or the P or the K, are actually readily available. And we heard some of the figures earlier on that combined N in pure form and in compounds, something like 3.5 million tonnes a year required in the UK. Phosphate up around 1.8 million tonnes, that sort of thing. And then we can see that there are a range of resources for all those materials. So, for example, if we look at the nitrogen, it's possible held in the waste streams from human sources, about 1.8 million tonnes, from the food AD sector, about 2.5 million tonnes of nitrogen, and about 4.2 million across agriculture, obviously mainly coming from the more intensive animal production. Now, surely all that material isn't available as such, but there is plenty enough there to make a significant impact on as a viable means of supplying a significant part of the nitrogen market, and also the P and the K as well. So that's how we sort of fit into the things. Does the product actually work? Well, we've been trialing the material now since about 2014. We originally came into the area looking at, could we make a fertilizer? Full stop. Does this actually make things grow as opposed to die? So we very much were concentrating on making products that were essentially analogues of the sorts of material that were in the market already. And so we started out with a high nitrogen material, which is about around for us, which is about 2810, and then a range of 2010-10 type materials. Initial trials at Cirencester and Harper and with local farmers. I think that the main thing to get on board with this at the outset is that whilst we were doing the academic trials, we were very much interested in giving material to local farmers to tell us what was wrong with it in terms of handling and spreading and all that stuff. So we've been sort of dealing with that right from the outset, because this product, it looks more like an animal feed nut. It's sort of 6 millimeter cylinder, and it's obviously got a high organic content, generally about 50% in most of our material. So it looks more like a food pellet than anything else. We had no problem getting yield equivalents right from the outset, which is a pleasant surprise for us. And then we carried on our trials, moving more to sort of a wider range of geographies and soil types through an extensive trial program with Velcourt. And then we started to do some additional work with, originally around potatoes, but then oil seeds as well, because we were getting interest from the market. And first of all was Pepsi, and then that's our main customer is Pepsi, and that essentially around the Walker's Crisps type production facility. But there's also other potato manufacturers that we've been talking to as well, and have been trialing material with. But I think what's interesting is when we started the trial program with Pepsi, which is going back about 5 years now, we brought on board a whole range of other people, ranging from the World Wildlife Fund through to NIAB and also Cranfield University. And we started to notice early on that the material didn't necessarily behave quite the same way as conventional fertilizer. And so there were extra things that were happening in the soil that were being beneficial. And those really center around the fact that we've got an organic material with the nutrients enclosed in it. There's a big chunk of chalk in there as well. And one way or another, the release of the nutrients into the soil is slower than you would get from a conventional prill, but not so slow as that it actually impacts on the growth of the plant. But what does happen is it's released over a longer period of time. So it does seem that the nutrients are in the soil for a longer, available in the soil for a longer period of time. So instead of being there for about 2 weeks, we get the same release over about a 4-week period in general. And that means that we get we're seeing from all sorts of tests that we're doing on how much of the material is washed off when it goes into this, when it's first delivered. The runoff is actually lower. The runoff into or out of the system, if you like, what's washing through the leaching material is lower as well. But we're also getting nice results, particularly where we incorporate urea into some of our formulations to push up the nitrogen levels higher, or if there's not recovered ammonia available, we will do that. And we're getting good suppression of ammonia release as well, broadly in line with the sort of thing you'd see with the urease inhibitor. So we're doing more work on that. So there's essentially, we're losing less nutrients from the system, which is great. And that allowed us to look over the last 3 years at essentially supplying lower levels of nutrient to the field. And we've seen reductions. We think that we're pretty sure we can do a 30% reduction in nutrients to field without any loss in yield. Some of the data we've got actually suggests that we would go further than that, but I think that's pushing our luck. But around certainly 20–30%, we're very happy with that, as are the guys at Cranfield. So that looks good. Also seeing benefits in soil to do with all the good things going on with general structure, because there's organic material going in, but also all the bioflora and biofauna materials are increasing quite significantly. So that's useful, and also basically just less carbon being taken out of the soil, and more being retained over longer periods of time. And again, we've got good results from a range of assessment tools of how much carbon is left in the soil after our materials are applied. And that is around this basic fact that sort of 50% of what we're putting on is organic, and more to the point, it's organic that's already been partially digested. So it's quite robust material that's going back into the soil. So it is staying there for a long time, which starts to activate some of these areas around not just regenerative farming in terms of increasing soil health, but actually using soil as a medium for long-term retention of carbon. Okay, so that's, it works and we're very pleased with it. When's it going to be available? Most of
Professor Hammond, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go to questions if I may, and you've already alluded to one of them. A question from
Peter, by the way.
Yes. So, what's the product called, and can a farmer apply it? And I guess it sounds like you're in sort of seeding the market stage, excuse the pun.
Yeah.
So when will it be available? And what's it called really to begin with?
Okay, well, it's called CCM Growth. It may not end up in the market as that. That's our name for it. It is likely to come out through the conventional distributors. So that's in the pipeline at the moment. That isn't to say that there isn't a considerable amount of material going to field. What we have done is, because we have no experience of the fertilizer market, we've tended to sort of hang back from it, to be honest. And we've been fortunate that our route to market has been through the likes of the Pepsi supply chain. So, for example, they'll be receiving umpteen thousand tons of material this year to go into the potatoes, and also off into their wider supply chain in Europe. At the moment, we've got two plants actually running, one in Shropshire and the other one in Birmingham. They're only producing this year something between them of around 10,000 tons of fertilizer. The new unit from Pepsi comes online next year along with a couple of others, and that will produce another 15,000 tons, but most of that's going straight into Pepsi's own supply line. As far as availability in the market, we're really talking, if the reality of it being what more widely available is 24, 25, to be honest. And that's simply because we haven't got the plants to build it yet. They're coming through and there's more and more people committing to it. But for it to be in the open market and generally available, we're looking 24, 25, to be honest. And the advantage of that, I think, that for your buyers are that, I'm saying all these wonderful things about how nicely the fertilizer works. One, there'll be, we've got 2 and 3 years evidence on those to do with the environmental stuff on ability to use low application rates. That'll all be firmed up. So a lot of the things will have been debugged, if you like. So that will be good. And I think also it introduces the fact that there will be some changes in the way the material's used. So, for example, what we're seeing at the moment is people applying probably a higher level of nitrogen in the first application in the spring, missing out the second one, but essentially because the material, and I'm sort of, please bear in mind that I'm out of my area on this, but my understanding of it is that the highest risk application for you guys is in the spring, because the weather's going to be all over the shop and you may well lose a significant amount the rate it rains at the wrong time and all that sort of stuff. So the fact that it doesn't wash off so easily, I think it's viewed as giving a bit more security to that first spreading. But the expectation is, and we've talked to other liquid ones, I'm afraid not the brine flow people yet, but actually deploying liquids around it later in the season, particularly when you can get that high degree of accuracy and see what is needed where. So, I think overall what it comes down to, it's going to be used in a slightly different way, but actually overall it will help you to make best use of the resources that you've currently got, and maybe give you a bit more flexibility overall, and then lead into.
Simon, I'm going to have to stop you. I'm ever so
Go
sorry.
ahead. All right.
Fascinating topic, and we'll pass on your contact details to all the members on the call. But yeah, wonderful insight into the future of plant nutrition. I think the effects of or the events of 2021 have focused the minds of both growers and agronomists, and accelerating the much needed adoption of these new technologies. So thank you very much. And lastly, and by no means least, we go to God's own county, and we've got Scott Garnett, who's an agronomist for ICL Plant, UK and Ireland. And Scott, your topic today is the importance of improving nutrient use efficiency. And as you understand it, you have a fertiliser strategy and UK mined fertiliser that can essentially help with that. And as mentioned, we touched on earlier about 2028 looming and ELMS coming in, removal of single farm payment, and with traditional fertiliser price at an all-time high. I think improving and understanding nutrient efficiency is now a necessity. It's not a nice to do. So really over to you, Scott. Interested to hear what you've got to say about that.
Thank you. I'll try and share my screen. I presume everybody can see my presentation.
Yeah, you might want to pop it up on the.
There you go. Is that better?
That's it. Perfect.
So first things first, introduction to me. Scott Garnett. I started my career in the army, then became a farm manager. Did my degrees in soil science and plant physiology at Myerscough, which is part of Lancaster. Then I worked globally. I've worked all over the world as an agronomist, and I've been at ICL now for about 10 years. I now head up the R&D within ICL for polysulfate, or everything out of Balby Mine, and that area there. I'm also the coordinator for the IPI, which is the International Potash Institute for the UK and Ireland. I sit on the AIC committee member and the Agricultural Environmental Boards, and I'm an advisor to AHDB on cereals and livestock. So between that, I have a wife and 2 kids that I see every now and then as well. A bit of an introduction to who we are as ICL Balby and who we are as a company, ICL. We've been going for about 50 years in Balby. We're the largest employer, like it says on the info, in the East Cleveland area. We're the only polyhalite mine in the world at the moment. I know there's another company down the road, Anglo American, that are going to be selling product or going to be mining product in the future, but at the moment it's just us. We say we're one of 2 primary producers in the UK in the fertilizer market, with us and CF, but at the moment, obviously, I think that's just us that's holding that banner. We're a non-nitrogen company. It was quite interesting listening to people talking about the nitrogen products this morning, but I'm going to talk a little bit about nitrogen and availability in soils as I go through my talk. And we produced about 1 million tons of polysulfate a year at the moment. And that's 480,000 tons of SO3 as we would be able to if we just sold it at that. And the UK market, we estimate, is about 300,000 tons of sulfur. So I'm going to concentrate this morning on the relationship between sulfur and how that makes a big difference on NUE for all of us on the farming side. As ICL, we work towards 5 pillars. So these are the parts of the areas that, as the company, that we target working forward. So it's increasing nutrient use efficiency and uptake with all the plants, promoting soil health and balancing nutrition. The benefits of that: improving root development and crop establishment, yields and quality, and reducing the carbon footprint on farm. These are the 5 pillars that as the ICL company that we work to and we try and strive to on all our research projects. So let's start with sulfur. Why have we got an issue? This is a great illustration, and I think it really explains why we see such sulfur deficiencies in the UK. So we talk about, we've all heard of the Clean Air Act, and this is exactly what it's done to our air emissions. As you can see, the red line is the emissions of sulfur dioxide that would be coming from the atmosphere, and the green and the line with the blue dots is basically when we started to actually use sulfur-based fertilizers in the UK, and we can see how that is actually climbing. What was interesting, this is about, probably in the 60s or the 70s, every hectare in the UK used to receive about 120 to 130 kilos of SO3 for every hectare in the UK. Now we estimate that figure to be between 1 and 5 kilos of SO3 that's actually dropping onto our soils from the atmosphere. So we're no longer getting it for free, and we really need to have an understanding of what sulfur does within our soil and how it can actually affect nutrient use efficiency. This is a great chart from Landcrop. I borrowed this from John Telfer. So in 1995, 65% of their soil analysis that they did on all their soil across the UK was showing a sulfur deficiency. In 2016, that's up to 97% of UK soils are actually showing a deficiency for sulfur. Why is this important? You know, we put a little bit of sulfur on with our fertilizers in the autumn or in the spring, sorry, and you know, are we doing enough? This is some more data from Rothamsted from Woburn in 1995. As you can see, the plots on the left-hand side with 0 and the plot on the 50. There's a slight difference there in the top left-hand corner. There's a slight difference there when you can see within the crop. But as you move forward to 1999, you can actually see where we've got 0, even lower rates of sulfur. You can quickly pick out the sulfur deficient soils. And that's happened in 5 years. The difference in those soils, or the cleanness of the air, or the reduction that's been applied, being dropped on these fields, has made that much difference in 5 years. So that's in reducing our quality and our yields and our nitrogen use efficiency as well. So more data from land crop, which I think is a great thing, because I constantly talk to oilseed rape farmers, and I'm told that we're putting on AHDB. Basically, we've changed the regulation from 75 to 80 kilos of SO3, but we can see that oilseed rape, you know, nearly 25% of the crops are deficient. Wheat 35, peas and beans 52%, which is always staggers me, is that if we want to get better nodulation and an improvement in nitrogen uptake in our peas and beans, having a bit of sulfur in that profile actually improves that drastically. It makes a huge difference. So I can't understand why we don't put the sulfur onto our peas. Sugar beet and maize, as you can see, that there's some significant areas that are short of sulfur. So a bit of product promotion here. We have a product called polysulfates, which is a rock that we mine at Bolby. And we had a PhD student at Nottingham University, and we were looking at the release curve of the nutrients over a period of time. So we had some tubes where we put a certain amount of soil in each tube, bit of fertilizer on the top and a little bit more soil. And every day we pushed a certain volume of water through those tubes and we collected it at the bottom. And because sulfur is very mobile and we know that it will actually move through the soil profile and it'll leach just like nitrogen, we wanted to see how quickly how quickly those nutrients could be lost. And we found after 6 days that all the sulfur from ammonium sulfate was actually lost. Potassium sulfate was 12 days, and kieserite or magnesium sulfate went out to about 21 days. The poly went out to about 50 days. Now it's a granule, it's a rock, so it does take a longer time to break down. But if we think of the S curve and the availability of the nutrients that we want to improve the availability of the nutrients we want, we have to try and follow the S curve of the growing crop. So poly, when we put the nitrogen curve over the top of this, it actually matches the nitrogen curve very closely on most crops. And I'm always a great believer when we put a nutrient onto a crop is that I prefer to teaspoon feed to plants. You know, you don't give a baby a 3-course meal. You know, it's little and often that we want to give these nutrients to the plant. Very simply, we looked at the sulfur deposits in our soils earlier on, and from land crop. If you're trying to take up nitrogen from the soil, or take up mineralized nitrogen, or improve nitrogen uptake into our crop, we need a handful of potassium and a handful of sulfur for that process to actually work. This is how soil science, and this is how the plants will actually can absorb the nutrients from those profiles. Having that sulfur, or having available amount of sulfur available in the soil profile, will actually improve the availability of nitrogen that you've got within your crops. Some of the work that we've actually seen by using polysulfates is that the calcium and the magnesium within the product have made a significant difference to establishment and root systems. As you can see, where we've used polysulfate here, we see an improvement in roots. This is a crop of oilseed grape. This is taken on January the 4th over a winter period. We basically started to look at, we know sulfur deposits are low in the soil, but they're low in the soil in the winter as well, not just in the spring when we look at protein production and we look at oil production and dry matters. So we thought if we put sulfur in the autumn, as well as a spring application, what would that do to the crop? So this is an experiment or part of a research project that we've been running, where we're putting sulfur down in the autumn to look at the improvements we can get. And as you can see, that without polysulfate, we see, or without sulfur, sorry, we see a lot of bare soil. We see some senescence of the low-in leaves. Where we've used sulfur, we can actually see that the crop has actually got away. We've seen a significant improvement in root mass, and there's less senescence that we're seeing on the crop. So it's a stronger, healthier crop going through that winter period. As a research project, as ICL, we're a global company. We produce about 5 million tons of potash a year and about 5 million tons of phosphate fertilizer a year. And we have research projects all over the world. And I'm part of this group that works on these research projects. These are our average yield increases, or the responses that we've seen to using sulfur in the UK on crops. On arable, it's an average of about 10%. As you can see, it works right through peas and beans, about 22%, and grassland, working on dry matter, about 11%. But I wanted to talk really about the areas that I'm working on nutrient use efficiency. So I've set a number of research trials up across the country where I'm looking at the availability of nutrients over the winter period. And we have residual nitrogen in the soil, or mineralized nitrogen, and other nutrients. And how do we capture those into our plants? What can we do as farming to actually capture those? So what I've done is I've split some fields, worked with farmers right from Scotland right down to the south coast. And we go into those fields every 5 weeks, and we take 1/4 meter squares. We take all the biomass above the ground, we weigh them in the field, then we send them off to the labs, and the labs then will actually do a full nutrients analysis for me, but also give me a dry matter and a carbon analysis as well. And then from that data, then I can actually calculate the amount of nutrients that we've actually captured in the field. So the standard practice we've been doing is 100 kilos of polysulfate, which is 50 kilos of SO3. On top of a TSP analysis or application. These are some of the results that we've actually seen across the fields when we're working on it. So these crops are before nitrogen is actually applied. So there's zero nitrogen gone onto these fields. We're just really concentrating on what's in the soil profile and what we can actually do. And where we've used polysulfate, we've improved that nitrogen uptake by about 28%, which is about 6.5 kilos a hectare. Now, doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a significant, it's if you're improving your nitrogen uptake by 28% over that winter period, can we take that nitrogen out in the spring period? These are areas that we'd like to answer at ICL. But also, can we, if we capture this nitrogen from our soils over the winter period, there's less chance of that actually being leached into water courses and so on and so forth, and causing us issues further down the line. The conclusion of these results, we're now into our 3rd year of doing these, but this is 1 year's worth of data that I'm showing you here, is that we've seen a significant improvement in root mass. And my old tutor at university, talking about soils, used to say that if we can improve root mass by 1 centimetre per plant per hectare, we touch another 130 tonnes worth of soil, which is 130 tons worth of water and 130 tons worth of goodies and nutrients that go with it. But the conclusion from our trials that we found is that just by adding a small amount of sulfur over the winter period, we improve nitrogen use efficiency by 28%, carbon by 15.5%, which really doesn't mean much if I'm honest. We had a 41% improvement in phosphate, 21% improvement in potassium and sulfur. But the interesting thing is that when we look at these results, is that when we added the polysulfate to the soil, we didn't add any nitrogen or any extra phosphate. So I know that the whole industry at the moment is crippled with the amount of prices and how terrible and how hard it is for farmers. I understand that at the moment, but by having an understanding of what's in our soils and looking at that process closely of a full nutrient soil analysis, I think everybody should actually do that. We can actually manage those soils a lot better, and we can actually get a lot more bang for our buck with the nutrients that we're actually applying. This is polysulfate. We've talked about carbon footprints earlier on, and I thought it was quite interesting to put up. So polysulfate has the lowest carbon footprints of all the fertilizers on the marketplace, and it's extremely low. And as our production goes up, our global production goes up, our carbon footprint will actually come further and further down as well on that area. And this is the family of how the products actually work across the UK. So in the UK, we sell the granule and the standard, and the mini we use in sports and things like this. I heard a great story from one of our turf guys that Barcelona Football Club, when they take their pitch up, they put polysulfate mini down, which I think is pretty good. That's pretty nice. And that's me, basically.
Thank you ever so much, Scott.
No problem.
I'll kick off with a question, actually, and that's really around, you might have better answer this, but do you think there'd be any financial penalties or incentives from the government or processors or growers who fail to provide a tangible nutrient efficiency plan? I think a lot of these products are fantastic. We need to start adopting them. We should perhaps have been looking at them earlier. Adoption has been accelerated by the necessity to do that with 2028 looming, but it's all very well, but you know, as a farmer, what am I going to get back for that? And do you think there will be, I say, either penalties or rewards for having a proper nutrient efficiency plan on your farm?
I think the government will probably lead with a stick than with a carrot, to be honest. I think they'll probably fine us for not doing things how they want us to do it. But that's just a guess on my part, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the members there on the call? Nope, nothing popped up. So I'll wrap it up, guys. Thank you very much to everybody. 3 very different topics, 3 very interesting speakers. And also thank you very much to our audience today who've joined us. The next AF webinar will be the last Wednesday in March. And the subject, it will be everything you need to know for renewable energy on farm in 2022. So look out for an invite on that one, and we will see you then. And in the meantime, if there's anything that my team or my colleagues here at AF can do to help you, please do get in touch. Thank you.